In southwest Florida lies the sprawling and growing community of Rotonda West that is celebrating its 25th anniversary in 2015. This program documents the vision and the reality of the community, two very different scenarios. After a rocky start, Rotonda West today has 4,300 homes on 8,000 building lots, 13,000 residents, owners in 35 countries, 26 miles of waterways, and 5 golf courses. We are joined today by our guests, Jack Alexander and Pastor Carl Caldreiter. Both gentlemen have extensive knowledge of the history of our community. They will be joined today by our moderator, Jay Lyons, manager of the Rotonda West Association. Let's go right into today's programming.
Jack, to lead it off, you wrote about the very early days of the land Rotunda sits on in your book, Rotunda, The Vision and the Reality. Can you give us a little overview of where we came from here?
Yeah, well, the first thing I did was checked the history of the land because it's an interesting place, Florida. This particular area of Rotonda was home to the Calusa Indians, which is a Florida tribe, relatively peaceful. They were sort of fishermen. They lived as close to the water as they could, but they probably traveled all over this Rotonda area while they were here for 3,000 years. And then the Spaniards came, and the Spaniards tried to bring religion to the Indians, and the Indians weren't going to have any of that, so it became a little contentious, and eventually the Spaniards were here for 300 years. They pretty much emasculated the Calusa, and then they got fed up and went back to Spain, and the King of Spain got fed up with the whole concept of America and ceded Florida to America. Mm-hmm. And President Monroe appointed Andrew Jackson to take control of the land and declare it government land and set up a committee to sell bits and pieces or allow homesteaders to homestead and have some control over it. And the first actual purchases of land down here were the railroad, the one that ran from Gainesville and now runs all the way out to the end of Gasparilla Island. Mm-hmm. And mentioning Gasparilla reminds me, we also had pirates. Gasparilla was named after Jose Gaspar, who made his home base back here along the islands just off our coast. Mm-hmm. So it was an interesting history, this land, before anything else happened.
Sure was, sure was. When did Rotunda West enter the picture?
I have to precede that a little bit. In 1951, two rich gentlemen named Vanderbilt came down here, and at that point the land was still practically all undeveloped. There were some homes on Cape Hayes, but essentially it was just a large chunk of swampy scrub and pines and a lot of wildlife. And so the Vanderbilts came and they purchased 36,000 acres, which is now where Rotonda is. And they decided to start a cattle ranch and try to breed a special breed of cattle that could handle the Florida weather and mosquitoes and whatever. And they ran that ranch for about 18 years, and then at the end of that, the authorities were beginning to control the land more and regulate the use of it and zone it, and their farm became zoned as developable, and they couldn't make the money they thought they could and operate it the way they wanted to, so they decided to sell out. And they asked a local attorney named Leo Watutsky to represent them and sell the land. And he said, well, how much do you want for it? They said, well, see if you can get $10 million for it. They had originally paid $900,000 18 years earlier. So Leo goes to work and he has a bid. He has a bid for $10.5 million when suddenly in the door walks a gentleman from Miami named Joe Klein. Joe Klein was an interesting personality. He was a salesman, superb salesman, but that's pretty well all he was. He was a visionary, and he envisioned this. He bought a large chunk of land. He wanted to buy a large chunk of land that he could then divide into plats which he would then sell individually at about 20 times what he had obviously paid for them. And he was one of the last of the buyer beware breeds of land developers that Florida was famous for. And he had a vision for Rotonda, and he needed a large chunk of land to do this. Well, he had come over from Rotonda East, and he brought the name. And the concept of Rotonda was a circular community, would be at the core, and it would have canals and houses and amenities based all around this like a wheel. Mm-hmm. And in the center would be a commercial area with restaurants and shops and offices for small businesses and so forth.
Where did that concept come from, Jack?
It came from a gentleman named Martin, Pride Martin. Do you remember that?
Great Martin.
Mm-hmm. Pride Martin. I don't know where he got it, but
original designer was Phil David.
Somebody told me he got it from Paris. And the whole concept of Rotonda, well, Klein's concept was quite interesting because the canals, from an engineering perspective, the canals in each segment of this wheel, and there would be 8 of them if you envision a wheel with a hub and spokes.
Right.
They had the canals and the roads, but the canals drained into the river, to the Rotonda River. Mm-hmm. And the Rotonda River was a round river which went around and was open at the ends and drained into, essentially into Coral Creek, which went into the Gulf of Mexico. That was the concept. Mm-hmm. So, but of course the canals weren't here. So Klein offers $19.5 million on this bidding, going from 10 to 19.5. So the Vanderbilts bid out pretty well on the 900,000.
I guess they did.
The actual Rotonda development itself is on 26,000 acres out of the 36. And of that, Klein decided that 19 or 20,000 was developable. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So he got the deal and Rotonda was born. Rotonda West was born.
Mm-hmm. Whatever happened to Rotonda East? Did that ever occur? Or?
Well, essentially, Mr. Klein and his people were thrown out of Rotonda East, which was Palm Beach. It straddled Palm Beach and Martin counties. And there were several communities involved in it, but Joe was a pretty slippery guy, and the Kavanaugh were lot salesmen. They were not developers in the sense that we think of a development with amenities and shops and everything that goes with fine. He wanted to sell lots. That was his deal. And that was they made their money, and it was a big cash flow deal. And that was one of the problems at the beginning, which I can get into if you wish. But
so, Jack, can you expand upon that a little bit?
well, they came in here with this great vision, and it was a vision on paper. But as I said, their expertise was in selling lots, and they were great salesmen. And they had a sales operation. They had 48 sales agencies in this country, in every state of the union. Every major city had a Rotonda sales operation.
Wow.
And they were giving parties, cocktail parties, and they had booths at every state fair, and they were giving free trips to Florida to buy your retirement place. And they were just selling lots like cans of beans. But when you sell a lot or sell a development, you have to have amenities that go along with it. Because so they were selling, originally sold about 20 to 25 lots for every house they built. And that is against the norm in construction, which is more like 3 lots to 1 house. The second problem they had was that they made an early decision to build the houses themselves. The first 500 houses they were going to build. Their idea was to set the architectural standard, if you like.
Sure.
which turned out to be a bit of a joke. But instead of bringing in the local builders who were builders, these lot salesmen decided to build houses, and they made some architecturally very attractive models, and they put the models up, and they started to sell off these models. But their audience was essentially, there were three parts to their audience. There were people who were ready to retire and wanted to buy a lot and come down and build a house and come to Florida. There were people who wanted to, were younger people who wanted to build a lot in Florida for future retirement, maybe 20 or 30 years down the road, hoping it would increase in value. And then there were just thousands of pure investors who would buy a plot of land, they'd never come down here, they'd never see it, they couldn't care less. They were counting on the community would be built around it and their lot would expand in value. And Kavanaugh, the developer, sold that to a fare-thee well, because he was telling everybody who would listen that a lot here, like a lot in Rotonda East had done, had increased in value by 143% in 3 years. And to say that that wasn't exactly true is to be fair. It was an outright falsehood, which the Federal Trade Commission eventually discovered and nailed them for later on. So these were two of their problems.
So that's the vision.
The vision.
You want to expand on the reality? What happened in the reality of the whole situation?
Well, the reality, of course, is today, and you have to say, looking back, it's a wonder that Rotonda survived. It's a wonder they survived the first 8 or 9 or 10 years, the 70s essentially. But things began to improve about 1980, but that was 10 years into the mission. By then, they had a lot of pioneering people, residents here. Carl was one of them. You came here, I don't remember when, 73 you said?
I came in 73, and I'm a big town boy. I came out of Detroit, and we came down through here, came through Englewood, and the traffic light out at the intersection was 7 o'clock in the evening, and it was already blinking red and yellow, and didn't seem like there's anything going on down here when we came down. Wife was concerned about, made a comment about going to the bottom of the world, and we're not quite sure what we were getting into. We were called down here to organize a new congregation of our church, and when I got here, I discovered there's only 171 people, and wasn't it very easy to find a lot of Lutherans interested in organizing a congregation among 170 people, and so on. But I was also called to be the chaplain to the Superstars. We'll get into that story a little bit later. It was rather drab. It was not inviting at the time. We were, as Jack mentioned, they were starting too many homes. We were starting at least one house a day, 7 houses a week for many months. And so we had a production line of foundation being dug and then going on down. You could follow it right on down the block until you got to the finished house. To say nothing of the fact that you got people coming from all over the country not knowing where they were around, and there were few, if any, amenities around. We had water and sewer, and that was about all. So even organizing the people to be neighbors and to get to know one another was a pretty big task. So Dr. Joe Cirillo and Jack Fox, who had been Assistant Attorney General up in Pennsylvania, the three of us were called upon to help kind of organize. By the time I got here, there was a Fiesta Association here. Joan and Harry Carr were the first family down here, and they were very aggressive in helping to get things going. But it was slow, and it was not always a happy kind of a situation. A lot of unhappy people during that particular time.
Yeah. You mentioned the Superstar competition, Pastor Carl. How did that come to be?
That's an interesting facet. Superstars is the brainchild of Dick Button, who was Olympic superstar himself as a figure skater, gold medal figure skater. And he had a vision too, and he was looking for the perfect athlete. Not necessarily the fastest, the strongest, or whatever. He wanted the perfect athlete, and so he decided to develop a program that required the dexterity and the abilities of all different athletic involvement, and called it the Superstars, looking for the superstar. He spent a lot of years trying to put the thing together and sell the program, and finally sold it to ABC. And ABC then got involved and started looking around to where to hold this event and so on. And I have a hunch that, there's no history about how it became part of Rotunda, but I have a hunch that Joe Klein, the developer, was a friend of one of the executive producers of this show through ABC. ABC wanted to keep the sports audience together from the end of the Super Bowl to the beginning of the baseball season. And so this was an athletic event, a sporting event made for television. That's the Superstar.
Yeah.
And it helped to put Rotunda on the map.
Right.
We can talk a little bit about its development later if you want.
Yeah.
I could add one point to that if you like, that Don Ohlmeyer, who was the producer for ABC, happened to be a close personal friend of Ed and June Milton, who came from Chicago. And they were early residents in Rotunda. And so he had mentioned to Don apparently something about Rotunda and what a wonderful place it was. And that's how Rotunda, they came to Klein. Klein embraced the idea quickly.
Yeah.
It created initial problems right off the bat because we were having 14, 15, 16 athletes at a time coming in for quarterfinals and semis and so on.
Right.
We needed a place to house them. We needed a place to hold the event. They had to build a half-mile track. For many years, it was the only half-mile banked outdoor track in the state of Florida. Had to have a restaurant for people to eat. But when the lights went out and it was 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, there was nothing to do down here. It was dead. So everybody went either to Punta Gorda or Port Charlotte, to Sarasota or Venice and so on.
Could I chime in here? I've forgotten
Absolutely.
to mention that,
Absolutely.
you have to ask yourself what exactly was the sales appeal, apart from what Klein was selling, the round vision. But the vision was in 7 subdivisions. There would be a golf course in each subdivision. That was a great selling point to anyone who was interested in golf.
And what were those going to be named, Jack?
Well, originally they were going to be named after the great golf courses in the country, like Pebble Beach and Oakland Hills, and the second one they built in Pebble Beach. They were politely asked not to call it Pebble Beach anymore, by Pebble Beach.
Yeah.
So it's now called the Palms.
Right.
The same with Oakland Hills, it's now just the Hills.
Right.
And Pinehurst, we have a Pinehurst, as you know, and
Yeah.
so forth. So that was that entry. But so there were going to be 7 golf courses, one named for each day of the week,
Yeah.
and 7 marinas. Now the concept of a marina immediately suggests, oh boy, we're going to be able to have a boat, we'll be able to go out to the Gulf, the inland intercoastal, and so boating. We got into boating. Then the Oakland Hills, the first subdivision, they were going to have all underground utilities. You wouldn't be able to see telephone poles and ugly wires and stuff like that. The sides of the road were going to be curved, so when it rained, the water would run off and so forth. And if you look at Oakland Hills today, that is exactly what it is.
Absolutely.
Curved side roads and has underground utilities. But the minute you get into Pebble Beach,
Different story.
that concept went out the window. It was too costly. It also became difficult because of other concerns. And the other concerns, one of the major ones was, if you remember what happened in the early 70s, it was the beginning of the environmental movement. Ecology suddenly became important. The EPA was formed in the early 70s in Washington. And every state and county authority was now looking at what was going on environmentally in their area. And of course, Rotunda, of almost anywhere in the country, is one of the most sensitive ecologically areas there is.
Right.
for a number of reasons, one of which is that it's almost at ground level. It's a certified floodplain, for one thing. And of course, with Charlotte Harbor being a big estuary, they had all sorts of flora and fauna that suddenly had to be protected, and construction is always affected when you have eagles' nests and scrub jays' nests and gopher tortoise nests, none of which mattered back in the 60s and 50s. Nobody worried about that. But now we have ecology and environment, and the environmental regulations started to come in, and every time it did, they affected everything that contractors and construction people had to do. They had to change their plans, that adjusted their costs, and that was one of the problems Kavanaugh faced. They started their project at just the worst possible time, the 70s. Mid-70s, if you remember, oil was embargoed and there were long lines for gas. Well, this affected tourism coming down to Florida, where Kavanaugh was trying to sell their property. The economy went in the tank, and money became very tight. Inflation went up through the roof. They had all these problems, while they still had people coming in that they had to take care of. And the success of Rotonda today, I can trace back to probably two things. And one of the main ones is the early pioneers that came in here. There were certain ones among them that had that kind of personality, that they were leaders. They knew what they wanted. They were not going to be pushed around. And they were in the developer's face every minute about, well, you promised this, where is it? Now, you promised this, you didn't give it to us. You promised it would be this way, it's not this way. We got a nice golf club, but we don't have a clubhouse.
Right.
Oh, you'll have a clubhouse. Well, eventually they got a clubhouse, but it was about 10 years later. So these were some of the problems that were going on at the time. By the late 70s, the rumors were starting that Kavanaugh was pooling money. Kavanaugh was a corporation in Miami. They had set up a corporation here for Rotonda as a subsidiary company. But they were pulling money out of the subsidiary company, and the corporation was taking that money and going into the gambling business in Atlantic City. This was the rumor. It started as a rumor. Well, this was then found to be a reason for why these amenities aren't coming in, because they're just milking this place for money, and they're pulling the money out. And sure enough, eventually it was confirmed in a news story up in the east somewhere that got back to Rotonda, that Kavanaugh was building a $100 million, 500-room gambling casino at Atlantic City, which was the birth of Atlantic City. That turned out to be true. But then in the late 70s, Deltona finished their assessment, and they sent out, I think it was about an 8-page letter to all the residents and property owners, and said, here's what we found. Number one, they nailed down there will be no water access to the Gulf for boats. So that kills part of the vision.
Right.
They looked at the golf course situation and said, absolutely, there will be no 7 golf courses in here by 77. It's going to be at least 20 years or 25 years before you get, and even the next golf course, we're going to have to wait until we got enough people here.
So more of the reality.
The reality. Well, meanwhile, of course, a gentleman named Joe Tringali, who had been a career Army guy, had retired from the Army as a colonel, heard about Rotonda, was looking for a place to retire. He'd lived all over the world, and he came back to the United States. And he said Rotonda would be perfect, so he buys a lot in Rotonda. And in short order, he got a letter from Kavanaugh, from the developer, saying, okay, your house is ready. So he piles all his furniture up and he brings his wife and his kid, comes roaring down to Florida and goes into the office and says, okay, here I am, where's my house? It was a stunned silence. I'm sorry, Mr. Tringali, your house isn't ready yet. So, well, how long will it be? Probably 5 or 6 months. So he had them put the Tringalis up in a local motel somewhere at their cost. Yeah. It turned out that I talked, when I wrote my book, I interviewed many people, and I could name at least 12 people who had exactly the same experience. They got a letter saying, your house is ready. They came down here, and in some cases it hadn't even been started. One gentleman I remember, George Maniac, he came down here from Akron, Ohio, with 3 children, as I remember, a family of 3, a family of 5. He lived in a rented motel room with the family for 18 months.
Oh, my word.
Well, he persuaded Kavanaugh, the developer, to pay for that. But he told me he only got about 14 months out of them. He had to pay 4 months himself. And there were many other similar stories.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're on a track of really following the history of the developers. Let's continue on that track for a little while.
All right. Citicorp, they were getting a little concerned about the viability of the money. They had millions invested in it. Mm-hmm. So they sent in a consultant that they had named Jim Penzel. Penzel came in 1986. And with a mandate from Citicorp to find out what's going on and straighten it out, you know. Well, when he came in, I did interview him on one occasion. He said the first thing I walked in here, I knew that for 2 years, we weren't going to do very much but try to find the files and straighten them out. They had lots haphazardly all over the place. They didn't know who owned half of them. Some of them were underwater, so the first thing he had to do, he started an exchange program, for example. Mm-hmm. There were 5,000 lots in 2 areas that were undevelopable. He had to find the people, contact them, go through all the legal machinations, give them an opportunity to buy a developable lot elsewhere in the community. And he did that. He then immediately started the Links Golf Course, so that became the second golf course, and a fine golf course it is, if I may say so, one of the best in the country. And then 1 year later, he built Pebble Beach, which became the Palm, as I said. So suddenly, Penzel brought in 2 golf courses. He also really straightened out the water facility because he brought in a professional water manager. Mm-hmm. The developer, you'll note, was still responsible for the water situation, right. The potable water. Mm-hmm. They had built this big chrome reservoir in the center of the hub, which everybody is familiar with, but it had never been connected up. Well, he finally got that connected up to the water utility. Mm-hmm. And he did a lot of good, and he brought it along very nicely. And then in the mid-90s, I think it was 95, a new group bought the whole complex, named...
From Citicorp?
Pardon?
They bought it from Citicorp?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a gentleman who had worked for Citicorp. Mm-hmm. And had done other developments, named Gary Littlestar, became the developer. He was one of 5 partners, and they had had earlier successes. Well, Littlestar was as different from most of the other developers, who had been very confrontational for the most part with the property owners. He was a wonderfully gregarious, outgoing gentleman. The first thing he did when he came in was he got all the warring parties together and he had an open house. He had a town hall meeting. And he stood up, and I was there. I was amazed. He walked into what was almost a riot. And he stood there and he told them who he was. He says, I'm not going to stand here and make a lot of promises to you right now, but I'm telling you right now, if you have any questions, I'd be delighted to try to answer them. My door will always be open. I will listen to you. I will work with your board, and we will get things moving. But give me a chance, and hopefully things will start to go right. By the end of that meeting, they were applauding him, and everyone wanted to shake his hand, and it was a wonderful beginning. Well, the very next day, he started to attack the problems, and I can tick off a few of them. One of the biggest ones was there was a major class action lawsuit in process named Robles, named after the lawyer in Miami who put the thing together. And they had reportedly something like 20 to 25,000 people in this class, including a lot of investors who had never even seen Rotonda.
Right.
They were all over the world, these people. They had a little lot here and a little lot there, and they hoped it would multiply, right? So that class action was moving along, and City Court was just concerned about it. So the first thing Gary Littlestar did was he started a series of meetings that included the state authorities, the county authorities, City Court, two of three major accounting firms, including Pete Marwick Mitchell, Arthur Anderson, and representatives of the old corporation and the current corporation, Land Resources. And he had meeting after meeting after meeting. It took him 5 months, but he actually got them all together and resolved the thing without court involvement. And he came out of it with everyone was in agreement. This was going to happen, that was going to happen. And he even came out of it with $1.5 million from City Corp to contribute to the improvement of the existing roads. And they used that money to seed the tax units that
the MSBUs.
Now your organization, MSBUs, to take care of the road maintenance. And then shortly after that, he officially got the roads turned over to the county. So it became a county problem, the roads and canals. So he did that. He then he found 13,000 lots in waterlogged areas in the estuary of Charlotte Harbor, undevelopable. He had to find 13,000 owners and offer them exchanges. That took 3 years, and he cut that 13,000 down to around 300 that he couldn't find. Then he offered the land, which was very environmentally sensitive land, right adjacent to Charlotte Harbor.
This would be the 8th wedge in the wheel, which is St. Andrews.
Pardon?
That's St. Andrews, is that 8th wedge in the wheel?
Yes. Which was undevelopable, it was all water, of course. And he turned a lot of it over to the state, or he wanted to sell a lot of it to the state. But the state said, well, we love the idea from an environmental point of view, but you got 13,000 people who own lots in there, and we don't want to be part of that. So in 3 years, he solved that problem. The state loved the idea. The state then acquired that property, and that became an environmental waterland. So he did that. Then he decided to build the next golf course. But he took a look at the mandate, the original mandate, 18 holes in each of the subdivisions. He said, I'm not going to put 18 holes in one subdivision. He said, he was too environmentally conscious. I want to keep wildlife habitat, I want to keep shrubbery, I want to keep the water that's there. I want an architect who can build a golf course and not destroy all that and make it much more open. which means I'm going to use 2 subdivisions and put 9 holes in each.
Right.
Well, I was a consultant with him at the time, and I remember the discussion we had, because I asked him one day, I said, how are you going to get the golfers from the first 9 to the second 9? And he said, well, he hadn't actually thought about that. He thought maybe they'll just put their clubs in the car after they finish 9 and then drive to the other field, because it was about a mile away.
Right.
But eventually he decided to put an easement through. Well, that was a huge legal issue with the authorities, because between the end of one 9 to the beginning of another, he had to cross 2 suburban roads, 1 4-lane highway, and 2 canals.
Right.
And so he had to get easements. And in the end, he managed to talk. He talked. He was a good negotiator, and they loved him anyway up at Charlotte County. They let him take the golf carts across a 4-lane highway with just painted lines and a yellow flashing light to warn the traffic instead of a bridge or something.
Yeah. And this would be Rotonda Boulevard East that we're talking about.
It was. It is Rotonda Boulevard East.
Yes. Yeah.
And so he built the next golf course, and it's one of the best here. He essentially put the cap on what the vision could have been.
Yeah. And of course, Cape Cave Corporation and Gary Littlestar are still the developer of record at this particular
he also
point.
went out and he began to bring in amenities that nobody else had bothered about.
Right.
He brought in a Publix, for example, which was wonderful.
Right.
One of the problems that they had always had was they had these deed restrictions, which wouldn't allow people to park a second or third car in the driveway, and there were all sorts of problems. And so you own a house down here in this wonderful community, and mom and dad come down in their Winnebago or dragging their boat or whatever. Where are you going to put them? Well, they were dumping them all over on the other side of Boundary Boulevard for a long time. And Little Star came in and he said, well, we're going to set up an area. We'll fence it, we'll put lighting, and we'll set up an organization to run it.
Right.
And that's what's now in the
off Parade Circle.
Right.
Yeah.
Security lamps.
Yeah.
So Little Star, I say, takes a great deal of the credit. So when I say 2 credits go, 1 to the early pioneers, including Tringali, who incidentally became a county 3-term county commissioner after he left the board. And there is a
second would be Littlestar.
You know, did either one of you, through all of the tumultuous times that Rotonda West was under, did either one of you ever think that it would become the largest mandatory homeowners association in the state of Florida? Carl, maybe you
Well,
could...
homeowners association is really almost a spectacle because of the control. Some people like the regimen, and that many people don't. But it makes a great place to live, and to know that there is not necessarily going to be conflicts of neighborhoods and that sort of stuff. After coming here with only 171 people, and now we're up in what, 15,000, and homes that we paid $28,000, $31,000 for, now we're getting even some up as high as $250,000. It's really developing, blossoming well. And when I go back home to Detroit and people say, how do you like living in Florida? I always say, I don't know where I'd rather live.
Yeah.
That's the funny part. A lot of the early guys they had nothing complaints about their houses and the way they were built, and I'm talking about the early first 500 that Kavanaugh built. Every one of them I said, well, you know, why did you stay here? Oh, I wouldn't live anywhere else. This is paradise. This is
still the best kept secret in Southwest Florida. I mean, that's...
It is, and I'm not so sure that it has the kind of publicity that it should have. On the other hand, we're still building a lot of new houses on a daily basis.
Yes, we are.
My friend Melton came down, as I told you, the guy that knew Don Omar at ABC. he went to check his house one day, and he was one of the ones that had a free pool. And there was an entry from the pool into the house that went into a bathroom. And so we opened the door to go from the pool into the bathroom, and he found the toilet was right in the middle of the doorway. And he had to step over it to get into the bathroom.
And that wasn't the only one.
So he went to the developer's office and said, "What's this all about?" And the developer said, and he thought, "Holy smoke." He says it's that way on about 39 of the drawings.
So even being one of the people whose toilet was in the middle of the doorway, Mr. Melton was still happy to be in Rotonda West.
He wouldn't go anywhere else. He got a job selling advertising space for the local Englewood Sun. And he was happy as a clam, and he was
a great golfer.
Golf. He was a great golfer.
Golfer.
A good friend of mine, by the way.
Well, of course, now we have 5.5 golf courses, over, in Rotunda. And it really is a golfing community. And I know Jack and Carl, Pastor Carl and Jack, you're both avid golfers.
Oh, yes.
Talk about the current environment that we're in with golf.
Everybody I talk to, they loves it.
Yeah, there's a lot of social life going on. It's a truly developed community among the people, and the spirit among the people. It has its own problems. It has neighborhood squabbles about people want this and don't want that and so on. But it's a touch of paradise, and we try to keep it as organized without being dictatorial as we can. And to that end, I think the major share of the people are pretty well satisfied.
I came down to retire. I came down from Manhattan, New York. I lived in Midtown Manhattan for 15 years. And if you can think for a minute about living in Midtown Manhattan and for 15 years and then suddenly coming down to Rotunda, the culture shock was unbelievable.
Yeah, I agree.
And I decided I was going to play golf every day, which I started to do. And then the Bill Coy of the Rotonda West Property Owners Association asked if I would, said they'd like to have a book on the history of Rotunda. Well, he didn't say book. He said they wanted to have something on the history of Rotunda. Right. And he knew that I was a former journalist, so would I undertake it? At first I said no. And then he said, "Oh, come on. And I thought he was talking about some kind of a 2 or 3 page pamphlet. And so I started, and the more I got into researching it, well, it ultimately became the book.
The book.
And he's been a busy man ever since.
Yeah, it was. It took me 2 years to write it, a lot of research, and I wondered all along the way where this vision was going to end up, but as you can see, it ended up pretty well.
Yeah. Well, Jack, I want to tell you that everybody who reads this book thinks it's absolutely fantastic. You've done a great service for the Rotonda West community by writing the book, and we obviously we have this for sale. We sell it at our newcomers events in April and November, and as long as Jack will accommodate us, he'll come and sign your book for you.
Thank you. I'll take one.
Okay, there you go. Jack always tells me that he never got a copy of his own book. So, Pastor Carl, we've talked, about the superstar competition coming to Rotonda West and Dick Button. Could you elaborate a little bit more on some of the personalities?
Well, not only personalities, it was really a fun time to be in Rotunda, mainly because they needed marshals, they needed judges, they needed people to become involved in a rather expensive and highly organized television series that lasted for a long time. The whole series in Rotunda lasted 4.5 years, and then got moved down to Biscayne Bay and Miami and so forth. But here, it was a lot of fun. We had, all told, I think we had 58 or 59 world-class athletes coming here. They were competing on, they had 10 choices, and they had to pick 7 different athletic regimens that got involved in. One of which, for example, was hitting a baseball and so forth. And guys like Johnny Bench and Al Kaline and these guys were not allowed to do that.
Right.
But we had all of the top stars of literally every kind of athletic endeavor. Automobile racers, swimmers, skiers, Olympians, so forth. Johnny Bench, I mentioned, Franco Harris, Billy White Shoes Johnson from the Houston, and everybody around.
O.J. Simpson.
O.J. Simpson was here, and so forth. And the show was narrated and monitored by Jim McKay, who at the time was a really top-notch sportscaster. And he was assisted with Howard Cosell, famous Howard Cosell, and Reggie Jackson.
Ed McMahon.
And then, well, Ed McMahon was kind of the host to the Superstars.
Could say more about him.
He would show up, and he has a home right behind my house, matter of fact, and had a home there for a while. And it was a lot of fun. And then they would come and have quarterfinals, semifinals, and then we had the finals. Often wondered why they took the time. The guys got paid, people got paid for it, but it was not big money. I think the most that anybody made, the Superstar each year probably cleared maybe $45,000. And that it means he had to come here 3 different times.
Right.
Then at the tail end, then we had the women as well, and we had a lot of top women. Shirley Muldowney, I remember meeting Shirley Muldowney, and I said, "Why is she here?" He said, "Well, she's one of the best drag racers in the country."
Right. Yeah.
And I couldn't believe this beautiful blonde woman's driving drag races, getting 120 miles an hour in a quarter-mile stretch, and it was kind of fun. Yeah. And Kyle Rote was world famous soccer player. I referred to him as our American Pele, and he was our superstar for 2 years. And OJ was superstar, and Bob Seagren, so on. It gave them, I think it served in those early days, especially 2, 3, 4, and then the 70s, it served as the amalgam, the glue that brought the community together, because we had a common interest. We had exacting, just as exacting as filming this, for example. Everything had to be timed and whatever. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And
one of the personalities, I should have mentioned, a major personality in the selling of Rotonda was Ed McMahon, the old first banana of Johnny Carson.
Right. He ran into a conflict of interest later on in years.
Again, the word went out from Kavanaugh that Ed McMahon was our top salesman, and he was the vice president of the corporation, and that he had property here and a house here. So what actually turned out was that they gave him a house in payment for his services, because he was appearing at all these state fairs and touting Rotonda. And then he was down here all during the Superstars, handshaking and so forth, and supposedly having cocktail parties with the athletes at his new house.
We had some big parties at that house.
And one of the stories during the construction of some of the early houses, the suits, as they called, the suits of Kavanaugh, who ran the operation, came out in their suits and hauled a whole bunch of construction people off 2 or 3 houses they were working on, because they had found out that Ed McMahon was coming down to visit the property, and they wanted to take a look at his house. Well, his house hadn't even been started yet. It was still a piece of level ground. So they had to rush off, and when that story came up, the guy Larry, who ran the construction operation and whom I knew, he said, "Oh, yeah, that was par for the course." He said, "We would be working on something and they'd pull us off and onto something else all the time." So that was part of the problem. And labor down here was not in great abundance. And what they had 150 people, and 90% of them were transit. And they were having a lot of theft at the time. Or construction was wide open, and there were some of the open houses, unfinished houses, they were losing refrigerators and cabinets and construction tools right and left. So they got a security guy. They got a guy who won $25,000 in Las Vegas and bought a lot. And he came down here to see his lot, and they found out he had been in the security business. In fact, he'd been security head for Mayor Daley of Chicago. So they hired him on the spot and said, "You're our security vice president." And the first thing he did was he did a background check on all the construction people, and 90% of them had crime sheets down to here. You know, that was just a small interlude there, and early on. Yeah.
The other interesting situation was when Ed McMahon had, as I understand it, he had a conflict of interest of sponsorship and so forth. And when they moved down to Miami, came about that time, and that he could not become involved anymore because of this conflict of sponsorship. And I understand that then Kavanaugh Corporation handed him the mortgage to his house. And he said, "I don't know now, so I don't want the house." And so there's a big calamity about that. Yeah. But the house is still there. The present owner's got it back in the original condition. Looks great.
Yeah, they're doing. They just purchased that within the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And also Johnny Bench,
Johnny Bench has property here.
He still owns a lot here in Rotonda.
Still owns a lot.
Yeah.
And I've been keeping in touch with 4 or 5 people. Carl Schranz was a downhill skier, and he was teasing dinner at our house one evening and teasing my wife to come to Austria to visit with him, and then handed her a key to what ostensibly is the penthouse of the hotel he owns there. So she's still got that key and wants to go to Austria.
Well, thanks for that information. That's a great story about the superstars. I remember, I was in my 20s. I remember watching that program, avidly. You know?
As soon as somebody moves into town, I sort of gauged the age, and they said, "You were about 18 or 19, but do you remember the superstars?" And then Jack and I go to the new resident gatherings, and I like getting into some, and some of the older fellas come in, "Oh yeah, my dad and I used to watch."
Yeah, I want to add that Pastor Carl has donated a significant amount of information, archived information, to the association, and also donated a cabinet to put the information in, and it's on display at the community center. So
kind of serving as archivist right now, I guess.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure speaking with both you gentlemen. It's great to be in your company, and it's great to hear the stories of how we came to be. Thank you.
Our program would not be complete without a glimpse into the future. Here's Jay to do the honors.
I want to talk a little bit about where we're actually filming this event right now. We're at Broadmoor Park, which is a 160-acre parcel of land that we acquired, the association acquired 2 years ago. It was very generously offered to us at a very low price by Bill Stein, the owner of Rotonda Golf Partners, who owns all of the golf courses within Rotonda at this time. And the association is in the process right now of moving our administrative offices and ultimately move our meeting facilities to this location over the next 18 months to a year to 18 months. We have a survey out at this particular point in time with all the residents of Rotonda West, all the property owners of Rotonda West, to get their input on what they would like to see in this new meeting facility. And so I'm happy to say that at this particular point in time, we're sitting here on June 12th with about a little over 400 responses to that survey that people have participated in. We're going to be creating a variety of different access paths, walking paths, butterfly gardens. This is a 160-acre palette, a pure sketch pad that we can draw anything that we want onto it. And of course, the only thing that we're limited by is money. But over the years, and this will be probably a 15 to 20-year project, we will take this 160 acres of land and turn it into a passive park for all of the association members to participate in. There's been a lot of developments over the last few years within Rotonda. Broadmoor Park is certainly the central focus of what we're going to be doing over the next 15 to 20 years. But the association has worked very, very hard in establishing new elements, new improvements within the boundaries of Rotonda West, sidewalks and walking paths and new memorial parks and sprucing things up around the entire community. I've been here for 15 years as a resident of Rotonda West. I feel the same way that Pastor Carl and Jack do. It's really a great place to live. It's It's a fantastic place for if you're a golfer or a boater, or if you just want to enjoy the ocean and the ecology that is here. As I mentioned before, it is still the best kept secret in Southwest Florida. And I welcome all of you to come here to Rotonda West to enjoy the amenities that we're able to provide. And thanks very much for listening to us today.
That is a report on our first 25 years and beyond. It has been a unique and interesting ride. Our thanks to Jack and Pastor Carl and to Jay for giving their perspective on the past and the future. Both Jack and Pastor Carl have milestones of their own. Pastor Carl just turned 89, and Jack will be 90 in January. Happy birthday, gentlemen, and happy 25th to the Rotonda West Association. Thanks for watching.